Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something huge, something so well ingrained we barely notice it sometimes. We're talking about marriage, the institution itself.
Right. It's often sold as, the absolute peak, romantic success, family foundation, lifelong commitment,
Hmm.
the whole package. But what if that picture isn't quite real? More wishful thinking, maybe.
Exactly. So here's a question for you listening. If you knew, like absolutely knew, you could have profound, lasting happiness, real belonging, without ever saying I do, would marriage still have that same pull, that same allure? Would you still want that piece of paper, that legal status?
Ooh, that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? We've sort of inherited this idea that marriage equals love, equals happiness, full stop. But history, even just looking around us, suggests it's, well, way more complicated. So what is the purpose then today? Is it security? Is it love? Or maybe something we don't like admitting?
Okay, let's try a thought experiment. Imagine marriage licenses weren't forever.
Hmm.
Imagine they expired every, say, 5 years. You'd have to consciously choose to renew. How would that change things for you, for how you see marriage generally? Would that constant check-in point make things stronger or just expose all the cracks we ignore?
Yeah. It forces that big question, doesn't it? Is the forever part the actual glue? Or does it sometimes just paper over stagnation or reluctance to really look at things? Is till death do us part really about devotion? Always. Or is it sometimes just the bars on a comfortable cage?
I remember being at this anniversary party, 30th, a big one,
Hmm.
and there were toasts, smiles, looked great on the surface. But underneath, I could sense this, I don't know, weariness, like a performance of warmth. It really made me think maybe that fairy tale ending. Sometimes it just becomes this polite, quiet giving up.
That feeling you picked up on, it points to a real conflict, I think. We value freedom, right? Individual choice, making our own way. And yet, marriage, this massive legal social contract, we often just walk into it almost without thinking. Could the real driver deep down be less about, I choose you, and more about, God, I don't want to be alone?
And look at what marriage is now in the 21st century. It's not just vows anymore, is it? It's a financial merger. It's tax forms, health insurance. It's this whole curated thing for
Mhm.
Instagram. When did love become this admin burden with a photo op? Seriously.
It's pretty amazing, the sheer energy, the money poured into the wedding, the look, the party, the perfect pose, but the actual conversations, the ones about, building a life, debt, kids, how we'll actually handle conflict, those often seem to get pushed aside. Are we planning the party more than the marriage?
And what if the whole foundation? What if it wasn't built on romance in the first place? What if it started something much more, well, practical, property, deadlines, social order, and the love story part? Maybe that was just like added later to make it sound better.
Well, history certainly shows marriage served all sorts of functions,
Hmm.
way beyond just two people falling in love. If you look anthropologically, it was often about consolidating wealth, keeping social structures stable. This idea of romantic love being the main reason, that's actually pretty recent, historically speaking. So, has it really changed fundamentally? Or are we just, putting a romantic filter on something that's still kind of transactional at its core?
I had this conversation with a friend about her grandmother, married for decades. And the grandmother just admitted straight up, I didn't love him when we got married. I learned to.
Hmm.
Then she sighed and said, or maybe I just learned to be quiet. Wow. What's the cost of that? That quiet learning, all those swallowed words over years.
That silence. Yeah, it can be incredibly loud, can't it? It might not signal peace at all. It might mean slowly losing yourself,
Mm.
quieting your own needs. How many marriages that look successful are really built on endurance? On one or both people just shutting down parts of themselves?
Okay, let's turn this back to you listening. If you're married, thinking about it, ask yourself, like really honestly, is this your deepest desire, your authentic want? Or is some part of it, even a small part, about feeling like you should, like it's just the next box to pick?
Society has these scripts, right? These expected milestones. And marriages, well, it's usually right up there. Stepping away from that, questioning it, takes real effort. You have to consciously examine your values, your reasons. Are you choosing it? Or is the script choosing for you?
We always hear that saying, marriage is hard work. It's like, yeah, okay, we get it. But what if the work isn't just navigating challenges together? What if the real work is constantly trying to jam your individual self, your unique shape, into this standard institutional box that maybe doesn't quite fit?
That's a really important distinction. Yeah, maybe the struggles aren't always about relationship failure. Maybe sometimes they're symptoms of a basic mismatch between who we are now as individuals and this sort of fixed structure.
Think about history again. For ages, legally, women were basically property within marriage. Now, the laws have changed, obviously, but you have to wonder, has that deep down power imbalance really gone? Or has it just, shape-shifted, become more
Yes.
subtle in our expectations, our roles?
Oh, those historical echoes, they can be incredibly persistent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even when couples think they're totally equal, you still find these ingrained norms, unconscious biases, they creep in. Can something built on such an unequal foundation ever be truly equal in practice? It's a tough question.
All right, take a breath just for a second. Think about your core beliefs about marriage. Where did they come from? Who taught them to you? Your parents, culture, religion, and maybe the kicker. What do they have to gain by you believing marriage was the ultimate goal?
Digging into where our beliefs come from, that can be really eye-opening. So often, what feels like our personal truth is actually inherited. It's a story passed down. Identifying those sources lets you ask, does this story actually serve me, my happiness, my well-being?
We all know couples, right? Where the marriage seems, well, maybe a bit lifeless. We might even judge them privately. But then think about social media. All those hashtag couple goals posts. How many of those picture-perfect couples are actually just putting on a really good show, performing happiness?
Yeah, the curated world of social media sets this bar that's often totally unrealistic. And that pressure to look perfect, it can definitely hide a lot of dissatisfaction. Plus, it fuels this comparison game, which, just undermines real connection anyway.
Okay, here's a stark choice for you. Would you rather be in a perfect-looking marriage, ticks all the boxes, everyone approves, but inside you feel like your soul is just suffocating? Or would you choose a path that's maybe unconventional, maybe even lonely sometimes, but lets you feel fully, truly alive?
That dilemma really forces you to weigh things up, doesn't it? External approval versus internal truth. Is the comfort of fitting in worth possibly sacrificing? Well, your own potential, your own spark.
Let's look at the stats for a moment. Divorce rates are still pretty high. Couples therapy is a massive industry. Is that just about individuals failing, picking the wrong person, not trying hard enough? Or could it be pointing to something bigger, a problem with the institution itself?
Well, individual choices definitely matter, of course. But when you see so much marital distress, yeah, it does suggest maybe there's a systemic issue too. Maybe the expectations we load onto marriage, maybe they're just not sustainable for modern life, for modern individuals.
Okay, rapid fire questions. Think fast. Would you give up your biggest career dream for your partners? Yes or no? Would you change a core belief, something fundamental about you, to match theirs? Would you shelve a lifelong personal goal for the sake of this?
Whoa, yeah, those hit hard because marriage is full of those negotiations, those compromises. It has to be to some extent, but
Yeah.
where's the line? When does compromise slide into just erasing yourself? When does being together mean losing what makes you you?
I have to admit, personally, the idea of a deep, connected, lifelong partnership that resonates a lot. But the word marriage, it just feels heavy sometimes, restrictive, loaded with all that history, all those expectations.
That makes total sense. That conflict is very real for a lot of people. We have this deep human need for connection, for partnership. That's powerful. The tricky part is squaring that need with this institution, this thing called marriage, that comes with so much baggage and maybe doesn't fit our modern values of autonomy, equality.
You know, a lawyer friend told me once, getting a marriage license, super easy, almost trivial. Fill out a form, pay a fee. But getting divorced, unwinding that legal knot, it's often brutal, emotionally, financially, just devastating. That massive imbalance between getting in and getting out. It says something, doesn't it?
It really does. That asymmetry, it makes you question how much real thought, how much realistic understanding goes into that initial I do. Are we truly grasping the lifelong consequences when we're caught up in all the romance and excitement? Probably not, often.
Okay, here's a really controversial thought. Maybe sometimes. The biggest act of love isn't marrying someone. Maybe sometimes it's choosing not to marry them, to protect the love you do have from all the pressures and constraints the institution brings with it.
That definitely flips the script, doesn't it? Challenges the idea that marriage is the ultimate proof of love. It suggests that real love might sometimes mean finding a different way to commit, a way that actually supports both people's well-being and growth, even if it doesn't look like what society expects.
Think about the wedding industry.
Yeah.
It's massive, right? Billions of dollars selling this dream, this fantasy of happily ever after. But the actual marriage that follows, that's suddenly DIY, do-it-yourself, no guarantees, very few instructions.
That huge gap between the wedding fantasy and the day-to-day reality of marriage, yeah, that can lead to some serious disappointment. Are we being sold something that the institution itself just isn't really set up to deliver consistently?
Okay, gut check time. Be really honest with yourself. What scares you more? The sharp pain and upheaval of a divorce, or the slow, quiet dread of decades stuck in a marriage with no love, no connection, which feels like the deeper kind of failure, the deeper betrayal of yourself.
Facing those potential outcomes head on can actually tell you a lot about your real fears, your real motivations around marriage. It forces you past the wedding day glamour to consider the long game, the potential reality of staying or leaving.
I remember this couple, so in love, you could just feel it, electric. They got married, and pretty soon, like months later, they were having these bitter fights over the dishwasher, whose turn it was to do laundry. Tiny things, right? But they felt huge, like the whole weight of their future was packed into those chores. And maybe it was.
That's a perfect little story because it shows how the structure, the fact of being married can subtly change everything. Those daily negotiations, dividing up life, they can either build more intimacy or they can become this breeding ground for scorekeeping and resentment.
Try reframing it. What if your desire for marriage isn't really about finding the one? What if it's actually more about status,
Mm.
financial security, or just, not wanting to be the only single person left in your friend group?
Looking at our motives, honestly,
Yeah.
yeah, it can be uncomfortable. But it's crucial if you want to know if you're chasing marriage for reasons that are genuinely about relationship or if it's more about external validation, societal pressure.
We spend so much time, money, energy on the wedding day, perfecting it. The dress, the venue, the vows, the photos. But what about, Tuesday morning after the honeymoon's over,
Yeah.
when it's just two people trying to make life work day in, day out?
That focus on the spectacle, it can really distract from the basics, can it? Like, can you communicate when things get tough? Can you support each other's growth? Can you handle boredom together? That's the stuff that matters long term, way more than the color of the napkins at the reception.
Think about arranged marriages for a second. Historically, they often had lower divorce rates than love matches. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they were happier, right?
Mhm.
Probably more about duty, family pressure, different expectations.
Yeah.
But what did we lose, maybe, when romantic love became the only acceptable reason to marry? Did we set ourselves up for something fragile?
It's a really interesting point, elevating romance as the sole basis for marriage. It's brought incredible joy, for sure, but maybe it also made marriage more vulnerable, especially when that initial high-intensity feeling naturally fades or changes over time. If passionate love is the only thing holding it together, well, that puts a lot of pressure on passion, doesn't it? Makes navigating the normal ups and downs harder.
Here's a twist for you. What if marriage isn't the thing that's outdated? What if we are? What if we've evolved our desires for autonomy, for constant growth? Maybe they've just outpaced this old structure, but we're kind of
Yeah.
stuck,
Right.
afraid to admit it.
That's a really provocative way to frame it.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the tension we feel isn't marriage failing us, but us outgrowing it, our needs changing faster than the institution can adapt.
Think about the successful marriages you know.
Huh.
The ones that seem to really work. Are they thriving because both people are growing but still have their own separate identities?
Mm.
Or is it often more like one person has had to shrink a bit, diminish some part of themselves, maybe unconsciously, just to make the we work smoothly?
That dynamic of compromise. It's so tricky. Some mutual adjustment is always needed, obviously. But a truly healthy partnership, ideally, should fuel individual growth, right? Not demand that one person consistently sideline their own needs or dreams.
All right, just take a quiet moment again, be honest.
Mm.
Do you still hold on to that idea somewhere deep down that marriage will be the thing that completes you,
Yeah.
validates you, fixes that feeling of not enough?
That longing for external validation, it's human. It's powerful. But putting the responsibility for our own wholeness onto another person or onto an institution like marriage, it's a recipe for disappointment, usually, for both sides.
Here's something to chew on. Maybe the most dangerous part of marriage. It isn't the fighting, it's the silence. The things you don't say, the parts of yourself you quietly agree to shelve just to keep the peace.
Oh, absolutely. Those unspoken compromises, that slow fade of your authentic self, that can be way more damaging than an argument. It can lead to this deep, hollow feeling, like you're living someone else's life.
Let's loop back to the beginning. If society just stopped making a big deal about marriage tomorrow, no more pressure, no more celebrations, no more expectations, would your personal desire for it shrink? Even a little bit.
It's a great way to try and untangle things, isn't it? Our own internal drive versus the external cultural conditioning. How much of the longing is truly us, and how much is just the background noise we've absorbed?
If this whole conversation has stirred something in you, maybe made you a bit uncomfortable, think about sharing it. Maybe with someone you almost married, or maybe with the person you did marry. See what comes up when you talk about it honestly.
Having those open, maybe slightly scary conversations about the big stuff, it's so important. It's how we challenge assumptions, both our own and society's, how we get closer to what's really true for us.
Here's a really sharp one. Could our whole belief in marriage, like fundamentally, just be a really sophisticated way to cover up our terror of dying alone?
Wow, yeah. The fear of loneliness, the deep need for connection, they're primal. It's definitely worth asking how much those fears drive the bus when it comes to marriage. And does marriage actually deliver the deep connection we crave, or just the idea of it?
Think about this. What feels like the bigger betrayal in the end? Breaking a marriage vow that no longer fits, that no longer serves either person, or betraying your own soul by staying put in a relationship that died years ago.
It's a powerful ethical question.
Yeah.
Pitting past promises against present truth, it really challenges that default idea that sticking it out, no matter the personal cost, is always the right or stronger thing to do.
You know how weddings feel like
Mm.
these huge movie premieres?
Yeah.
All hype, excitement, everyone watching. Sometimes the marriage afterwards can feel like the sequel that went straight to streaming. You know, familiar, maybe comforting,
Yeah.
but the buzz is gone.
That's a great metaphor. It really captures that potential gap between the big romantic launch and the often more quiet, everyday reality. Focusing so hard on the premiere can definitely overshadow the need to invest in the long, unglamorous run of the marriage itself.
Just pause and think about the sheer audacity of it. Promising your entire future self, someone you haven't even met yet, someone you're still becoming to another person, knowing that they're changing too, constantly.
Yeah.
How can anyone promise that?
It's profound, isn't it, when you really stop and consider the fluid nature of who we are? Making that lifelong vow, it demands incredible faith, a willingness to navigate total unknowns together and embrace change rather than resist it.
Quick exercise. List the traditional wedding vows in your head. Love, honor, cherish, etc. Now think about the unspoken vows, the ones that really operate day to day. Maybe it's, I vow to bite my tongue about your annoying habit. I vow to pretend to like your mother's casserole. I vow to scale back my ambitions so you can pursue yours. Which list feels longer? Which one carries more weight in reality?
Huh. Yeah, the gap between the official vows and the lived reality, the implicit contracts, that can be huge. And it's often the weight of those unspoken, unacknowledged agreements that becomes the real burden over time.
You probably know someone, maybe it's even you, who is just so good at being married, mastered the compromises, the teamwork, keeping things smooth, but has being so good at being part of a we meant that the I has faded, almost disappeared. Like they become so good at the role, they've forgotten the actor.
That merging of identities, it can be beautiful, a part of intimacy, but yeah, there's a danger there too. Losing that core sense of self, your own separate interests, passions, that's crucial to avoid. Too much merging can lead to feeling empty, resentful, lost.
A therapist friend shared something really stark once. She said, people come to me desperate to save their marriage. Far fewer, she said, come seeking help to save themselves from a marriage that's slowly killing their spirit.
Wow. That really highlights the intense pressure, doesn't it? The pressure to preserve the institution, sometimes even over the well-being of the people in it. It suggests we often prioritize the structure itself more than the emotional health of the individuals involved.
And what about staying in a loveless marriage for the kids?
Yeah.
What are kids actually learning from that? What lessons about love, partnership, connection do they absorb watching two people coexist without warmth, without joy, maybe even with quiet resentment?
It's such a tough situation. The desire to protect kids is huge. But yeah, growing up in an atmosphere of tension or just emotional distance, that has its own impact. It shapes their whole future understanding of what relationships are supposed to look and feel like.
Think about this. How often do you just tolerate little annoyances in your relationship just to keep the peace? His music taste, her way of loading the dishwasher, whatever. Now, zoom out. Could that pattern of swallowing small dissatisfactions, could it mirror a bigger reluctance? A reluctance to confront a larger unhappiness, maybe even leave a situation that's fundamentally not right for you?
Absolutely. Those small acts of self-silencing can build up. They create this pattern of passive acceptance, and that makes it harder and harder to speak up about bigger issues or to even imagine making a bigger change, like leaving, even if it's what you need.
You don't need shouting matches or cheating to be in a bad marriage. Sometimes it's just quiet. Two people who stopped actively choosing each other, maybe a long time ago, held together mostly by habit, maybe shared finances, and the fear of starting over alone.
That slow drift, the erosion of connection, that can be just as painful, just as damaging as loud conflict. That feeling of being lonely within the marriage, that's a profound kind of unhappiness.
Who gets to say what a successful marriage even looks like? Your parents, your friends, Instagram. Are those external benchmarks even valid? Do they have anything to do with what you need, what your relationship needs to feel alive and real?
Defining success has to be internal, doesn't it? For the people actually in the relationship, chasing someone else's definition, some societal ideal, it just leads to feeling like you're falling short or
No.
pursuing something that doesn't actually fit.
I used to think my own desire for marriage was purely romantic, finding the one. Then I had this uncomfortable realization. Maybe the big part of it was actually addiction, addiction to being chosen, that validation.
Ooh, that kind of self-honesty is powerful and rare. Looking under the surface of our desires,
Yeah.
especially the romantic ones, can show us where our own insecurities or unmet needs might be hiding. Needs we're hoping marriage will magically fix.
Simone de Beauvoir called marriage obsolete back in 1949, nearly 80 years ago. And here we are, still debating it, still feeling its weight, still questioning its relevance. What does that tell us? That it's incredibly powerful or incredibly limiting, maybe, still.
Beauvoir was definitely ahead of her time. Yeah. The fact that we are still debating it so fiercely, it just underscores how complex it is, how marriage sits right at that tense intersection of personal desire and social structure, and we still haven't figured it out.
There's probably a conversation about marriage you're avoiding right now. Maybe it's with your partner. Maybe it's just with yourself. In the quiet moments, what's the uncomfortable truth you're dodging?
Usually the things we try hardest to avoid thinking about. They're the things that hold the most important insights. Facing those difficult questions, even though it feels uncomfortable, that's where real growth happens. In life and in relationships.
Have you ever stayed in a relationship longer than you should have? Or thought about marriage seriously? Not out of deep love, but mostly because you were terrified of the failure label, the shame of a breakup, the awkwardness of being single again.
That fear of judgment, fear of the unknown, fear of being alone, it's a huge motivator. Huge, but making major life choices based on fear instead of authentic desire. That rarely leads to long-term happiness, does it? It usually leads to regret.
Just look around. Seriously, there's no single right way to love someone, to commit, to build a life. Marriage is one template, just one. Why are we often so afraid to design our own, to create something that actually fits us?
Embracing that diversity, accepting that different relationship models can be just as valid, just as loving, that feels crucial. Having the courage to say, okay, the traditional model doesn't quite work for us, let's build something else. That takes guts, but it can lead to something much more authentic.
Maybe the problem isn't marriage itself. Not always. Maybe the problem is the insane expectation that one person is supposed to be your everything. Your lover, your best friend, your co-parent, your therapist, your financial partner, your social secretary. All of it in one human being. Who
Yeah.
does that?
Right, that's putting an impossible burden on one relationship. And on one person, it's bound to lead to disappointment. Recognizing that we need a whole network of connections, different people for different needs, that actually takes pressure off the primary relationship and makes it healthier.
Okay, final dilemma. Imagine this choice. Stay in a socially improved marriage that feels safe but dull, like it's slowly dimming your light. Or choose a partnership that feels maybe less conventional, less understood by others, but it makes you feel truly alive. It lights you up. Which fear wins? Fear of what others think, or fear of living a half-life?
That really pits social acceptance against personal authenticity head to head. Choosing the path that feels true, even if it's harder or less traveled, that's often where real fulfillment lies, isn't it?
Okay, last deep breath. Brutal honesty, just for you. What did you really, truly hope marriage would give you? Security, validation, the end of loneliness. And can it? Can any institution, any one person, actually deliver those things? Sustainably, forever?
Getting clear on those deep down expectations, that's
Yeah.
key, because often the things we're looking for out there in a marriage and a partner are things we actually need to cultivate in here, inside ourselves.
Think about this. If your relationship was really struggling, would the idea of opening it up, exploring non-monogamy, feel like the ultimate betrayal?
Yeah.
The end? Or could you possibly see it differently, as maybe a radical act of honesty, a bold, perhaps desperate attempt to save the connection by changing the rules to fit the reality.
Exploring different relationship structures definitely pushes against deep-seated beliefs about fidelity, about what commitment looks like. It's absolutely not for everyone. But the willingness to even consider it, to talk about it,
Yeah.
that can signal a really deep commitment to honesty, to finding some way to stay connected, even if it means breaking the traditional mold.
You know that heavy silence in an unhappy marriage? That quiet tension? That's not peace. That's the sound of surrender. Two people giving up maybe one tiny polite concession at a time.
Exactly. The absence of fighting doesn't automatically mean things are good. Sometimes that quiet is the loudest sign that the emotional connection has just fizzled out. Resignation has set in.
Okay, project yourself forward. 10, 20, 30 years. Your future self looks back at the choices you made about marriage. To do it, not do it, how you did it. What do you hope they feel? Regret, relief, or just a quiet knowing that you stay true to yourself, wherever that led?
Thinking about our future self, about the legacy of our choices, it's a powerful way to get perspective now. It helps us make decisions that align with our deeper values, our long-term well-being, not just what feels easiest or most expected in the moment.
Maybe a truly strong marriage isn't one that looks perfect like a fairy tale. Maybe it's one that's resilient enough to handle cracks, to allow for change, for growth, for two individuals to still be individuals within the partnership.
Resilience, adaptability, yeah, those are vital for anything long-term. A strong relationship isn't one that avoids difficulty, necessarily. It's one that can navigate it. With empathy, respect, and a commitment to supporting each other's journey, even when those journeys aren't perfectly aligned.
You know, I've seen marriages that felt like beautiful prisons, gilded cages, and I've seen unmarried partnerships that just radiated joy and freedom.
Yeah.
That piece of paper, ultimately, it doesn't mean much if the connection, the actual spark between two people isn't there.
The legal stuff, the social recognition, it has its place, provides certain things, sure. But the real heart of any relationship, that's the connection, the respect, the commitment. That exists or doesn't exist regardless of a license.
Let's face it, we're all just kind of fumbling through this relationship stuff, aren't we? Trying our best. Marriage is just one particular arena, maybe with higher stakes, more public scrutiny, where we play out this basic human drama of trying to connect, trying to build a life with someone else.
Acknowledging that complexity, that uncertainty, it helps foster empathy, doesn't it? For ourselves, for others. We're all just figuring it out as we go.
So let's bring it right back. We started asking if marriage, the institution, is outdated. But maybe the real question, the one that matters most for you, is this. Is your idea of marriage the one you carry inside you? Your expectations, your vision, is that becoming outdated? For who you are now, for who you want to be.
That personal inventory, that's where the work really lies. Understanding how your own beliefs and needs are evolving, that's essential for making relationship choices that actually fit you, your life, your future.
You are not your relationship status. Let's just say that again. You're not married or single or divorced. That's not who you are. You're a whole person, complex, changing. The label, honestly. It's the least interesting part of your story.
Absolutely. Holding on to your individual identity beyond any relationship label, that's where your power lies. It lets you connect with others more authentically.
If anything we talked about today made you feel a bit defensive, prickly, lean into that. Often, that discomfort points right to the beliefs we hold most tightly, the ones that might need a closer look.
That discomfort, it's often a signpost, pointing towards an area where there's potential for real growth, real self-understanding, if we're brave enough to look.
So if this deep dive sparks something, maybe share it. Share it with someone brave enough to have the real conversation, even if that someone is just yourself. The most important conversations often are.
Engaging in that honest dialogue, internally or externally, that's how we move forward, how we challenge the status quo and maybe build something better.
This has been the deep dive. Our goal isn't to give you answers about marriage. It's to make you ask questions, your own questions, about why you believe what you believe and what those questions tell you about the most fascinating subject there is. You.